I was crouched in a dusty command tent in Helmand Province, sweat stinging my eyes, when the email from Mara landed like a grenade in my inbox. 4 months into my deployment with the 101st Airborne, my world was M4 rifles, sandstorms, and radio. Chatter. Then there it was. Subject line: "Let's handle this maturely." Attached was a PDF, cold and clinical. Divorce papers. After 12 years of marriage, Mara had pulled the plug, drained our joint bank account to pennies, and moved Caleb Holt into our Boise home, the house I'd poured my VA loan and every spare weekend into. My stomach churned, a mix of shock and bile, but I couldn't look away from the screen. The words hit like shrapnel. She'd filed in Ada County citing irreconcilable differences. No warning, no call, just 3 sentences in the email body, each one a blade. "I've moved on," she wrote. "Caleb's living here now. Let's not make this messy." Messy? I was 7,000 miles away, dodging IEDs, while she played house with some guy in my kitchen, probably using my damn coffee mug. The betrayal wasn't just her leaving. It was the calculation, the way she'd gutted our life while I was out here, trusting her to hold it together. My chest tightened like someone had parked a Humvee on it. I wanted to punch the laptop, scream into the desert, but I just sat there, the tense canvas flapping in the wind, my pulse hammering in my ears. Thought of our last goodbye at Boise Airport. Her hug stiff, her eyes dry as she said, "Stay safe." I'd chalked it up to stress, told myself we'd fix things when I got back. Now that moment replayed like a bad movie, her words hollow, her face a mask. She'd already been planning this, hadn't she? Checking out while I was packing my ruck, promising to wait. The lie stung worse than the divorce papers. 12 years, barbecues, late-night talks, the cedar deck I built for her, erased in a 1.2 megabyte file. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like it was mocking me, daring me to react. My hands shook, not from fear, but from something deeper, something I couldn't name yet. Betrayal doesn't just break you, it rewrites you. I was Elias Carver, 39 Staff Sergeant, the guy who kept his squad tight under fire, but this was an ambush I hadn't trained for. I scrolled through the email again, looking for a crack, a hint it was a mistake. Nothing. Just Mara's signature, digital and final, and a bank notification from earlier that day. $92,000 gone, leaving $1912. Our savings, my parents' inheritance, the cushion we'd built, it was hers now or Caleb's. The math didn't lie, but it didn't explain why. I closed the laptop, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. The desert heat pressed in, but I felt cold like the blood had drained out of me. I wasn't ready to feel the hurt yet. Anger maybe, but not the ache. That would come later. For now I was still standing, still breathing, even as my life burned down in a Boise suburb. Mara thought she'd won, thought I'd crumble out. Here. She didn't know me at all. The tense hum faded as I shoved my laptop into my ruck, the weight of Mara's email still pressing against my ribs. I stood, boots grinding into the dirt floor, and headed for the latrine. The mirror above the sink was cracked, reflecting my face in jagged pieces, eyes bloodshot, jaw locked. I splashed cold water on my skin, letting it drip down my neck, each drop a tether to the present. No yelling, no fists through walls. I dried my hands on my fatigues, straightened my posture, and walked out to pull my shift. Outside, the Helmand sun scorched the air, turning the base into a haze of dust and diesel. I grabbed my gear, checked my M4, and joined the patrol briefing. My squad's voices blurred, something about sector sweeps, radio protocols. But I nodded, muscle memory kicking in. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the void where our savings used to be. The image of Caleb Holt sprawled on my couch. Yet my hands moved, securing my vest, loading mags, steady as ever. Routine was my anchor, keeping me from unraveling. Back at the barracks that night, I sat on my cot, the springs creaking under my weight. I pulled out a notepad, scribbled a single word, confirmed, and tore the page, folding it into my pocket. Miles, my bunkmate, was sprawled across his cot, flipping through a dog-eared sci-fi paperback. He glanced over, his brow furrowing. "Rough day, Carver?" he asked, voice low, like he sensed the storm brewing. I forced a shrug, unlacing my boots with deliberate pulls. "Just family crap," I muttered, keeping my eyes on the laces. He grunted, returning to his book, knowing better than to pry. Soldiers learn fast when to let silence sit. I lay back, staring at the tent's canvas ceiling, the fabric sagging under the desert wind. My heart thudded, not fast but heavy, each beat a reminder of the life I'd lost. I didn't rage or weep. Those were luxuries I couldn't afford. Instead, I catalogued the facts. Mara's decision, the emptied account, Caleb's invasion. Each one was a stone in my gut, grounding me in a strange calm. I'd faced worse, ambushes, mortar fire, but this betrayal cut deeper, its edges invisible, yet razor-sharp. I exhaled, slow and controlled, willing my body to stay still. Before lights out, I cleaned my sidearm, the familiar click of metal soothing my nerves. I ran a cloth over the barrel, methodical, like I was prepping for inspection. Every motion was deliberate, a way to cage the chaos inside. I didn't need to name the pain yet. I just needed to move through it. The base's generator droned. Outside, a low hum that matched the static in my head. I reassembled the pistol, checked the slide and stowed it. Sleep wouldn't come easy, but I'd face tomorrow's patrol regardless. As I closed my eyes, the desert's vastness pressed in, mirroring the emptiness Mara left behind. I wasn't ready to fight her war, not yet. For now, I'd carry the wound quietly, let it sharpen my edges. She'd misjudged me, thinking I'd break under her blow. I wouldn't. I'd stand, silent and unbroken, until I chose my next move. The desert night clung to me, its silence amplifying the ache that had settled in my bones. Lying on my cot, the Helmand wind rattling the tent, I couldn't escape the pull of memory. My mind drifted back to Boise, to the life I'd built with Mara when our days felt solid, like they'd hold forever. Those moments flickered now, fragile and distant, clashing with the wreckage she'd left behind. It was 2011 when I first saw Mara at a brewery off State Street, her laugh cutting through the hum of a summer crowd. I was 25, fresh off my first tour, nursing a Coors Light. She was a receptionist at a walk-in clinic, her hazel eyes sharp with curiosity. "You're the soldier," she said, sliding onto the bar stool next to me, her voice warm. We talked until last call, about Idaho sunsets, her dream of hiking the Sawtooths, my plans to make the Army my career. 9 months later, we stood in a courthouse, her in a white sundress, me in my dress blues, promising forever. The early years were good. Mara would grill burgers on our patio, teasing me for overcooking mine. "Charcoal's not a flavor, Elias," she'd say, tossing me a fresh bun. We'd sit under string lights, her feet in my lap, planning trips we never took. In 2015, we bought our house, a fixer-upper in Boise's North End, funded by my VA loan. I spent weekends sanding floors, Mara painting walls sage green, her hair flecked with specks of color. She'd kiss my cheek, whispering, "This is ours." That house was our stake in the ground, proof we were building something real, but cracks formed, slow and insidious. By my third deployment, Mara's warmth faded. She stopped meeting me at the airport, her texts growing sparse. "Work's crazy," she'd write, but I'd call and hear laughter in the background, voices I didn't know. When I was home, she'd flinch at my touch, her smile forced. I'd talk about re-enlisting and she'd snap, "What about us? I'm not a pen pal." I thought it was the distance, the strain of my absences. I'd bring her coffee from Dutch. Pros leave notes on her car, hoping to bridge the gap. She'd thank me, but her eyes stayed vacant, like she was already gone. The last leave before Helmand, I caught her staring out our kitchen window, hands idle in the sink. "Are you okay?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "Just tired," she said, not turning. That night she slept on the couch, claiming she needed space. I didn't push, didn't ask why her perfume smelled new or why she'd stopped wearing her ring. I told myself we'd fix it later, that love could wait out war. Lying here now, those moments burned, each one a sign I'd ignored, a thread in the unraveling of us. The tense shadows danced, pulling me back to the present. Mara's choices, her new life with Caleb, cast those memories in a harsh light. The house, the laughter, the promises, they weren't just gone, they were tainted, a mirage I'd clung to. My chest ached, not for her but for the man I'd been, believing we were unbreakable. That man was fading, replaced by someone harder, forged in the quiet of this betrayal. The desert's chill seeped through the tent, sharpening the sting of those old Boise memories. As I lay awake, the past didn't just haunt me, it pointed to warnings I'd brushed off, signs of Mara's drift that had flickered long before her email. 6 months before I shipped out to Helmand, her behavior shifted, subtle at first like a fault line before a quake. I saw it all, catalogued it in my gut, but never called it out. That wasn't my way. Mara started staying late at the clinic, claiming overtime for paperwork. She'd come home past 9, her blouse unwrinkled, no trace of the day's grind. "Just catching up," she'd say, avoiding my eyes as she poured herself wine. Her phone, once left on the counter, now stayed glued to her hand, screen angled away. One night I caught a notification flash, some guy named Caleb, a name she'd never mentioned. When I raised an eyebrow, she laughed it off. "Just a co-worker," and changed the subject to my next deployment. Her voice was too bright, too quick. She took up yoga, or so she claimed, signing up at a studio downtown. Her gear, a sleek new matte, untouched water bottle, piled up in our garage, but her skin never flushed from exertion. She'd leave for classes in tight leggings, hair perfect, and return an hour later, unruffled. I'd ask how it went, and she'd shrug, "Fine," then disappear to shower. New earrings showed up, delicate hoops I hadn't bought, and her closet sprouted dresses, slinky, bold, nothing like the jeans she used to live in. "Retail therapy," she mumbled once, when I noticed a red number hanging unworn. Her social circle changed too. She'd talk about nights out with the girls, names I didn't recognize, Kelsey, Tara, no last names. "You wouldn't know them," she'd say, dismissive when I asked to meet them. One Saturday she left for a brunch that stretched past dusk, her phone off when I texted. She came back smelling of gin, her laugh brittle as she said, "Lost track of time." I stood in our kitchen, hands gripping the counter, but didn't press. My dad raised me to think before I act, and I wasn't ready to accuse. The biggest shift was her distance. Mara used to lean into me on the couch, her head on my shoulder during football games. Now she sat at the far end, scrolling her phone, barely glancing at the TV. When I'd reach for her hand, she'd pull away, muttering about being too warm. Our conversations dwindled to logistics, bills, groceries, my upcoming orders. Once I tried joking about our old camping trips, and she cut me off. "That was forever ago, Elias." Her tone was ice, and I let it go, swallowing the unease. Lying. Here in Helmand, those moments replayed like a surveillance feed, each one a red flag I'd ignored. I wasn't blind. I'd felt the rift growing, sensed her slipping into a life I wasn't part of. But I'd banked on time on my return to mend it. Now with her betrayal laid bare, those signs weren't just clues, they were proof I'd been played. My jaw tightened, the desert's quiet amplifying my resolve. I hadn't acted then, but I would now. The Helmand darkness pressed against my tent, but those ignored signs from Mara's drift ignited a fire in me. Not rage, but focus. I wasn't the type to storm or shout. I was a soldier, trained to plan, to act with precision. 6 months ago, when her late nights and locked phone raised my hackles, I'd started preparing, sensing a storm I couldn't yet name. Now, with her betrayal confirmed, those quiet moves were my lifeline, and I doubled down, building a shield against the chaos she'd unleashed. The Helmand darkness pressed against my tent, but those ignored signs from Mara's drift ignited a fire in me. Not rage, but focus. I wasn't the type to storm or shout. I was a soldier, trained to plan, to act with precision. 6 months ago, when her late nights and locked phone raised my hackles, I'd started preparing, sensing a storm I couldn't yet name. Now with her betrayal confirmed, those quiet moves were my lifeline, and I doubled down, building a shield against the chaos she'd unleashed. Before leaving Boise, I'd driven to a storage facility in Meridian, a low-key spot off I-84. Under fluorescent lights, I secured a unit and stashed essentials, My military records, the title to our North End house, my grandfather's dog tags from Vietnam. I locked them in a fireproof box, the key tucked in my wallet. No one, not even Mara, knew. At a small bank in Caldwell, I opened a checking account, funneling a quarter of my paycheck, $800 a month, out of our joint funds. It was subtle, buried in the noise of our bills, but enough to give me a foothold if things collapsed. Had I contacted Lucas Reed, a buddy from my first tour who'd traded fatigues for a law degree. Over a burner phone I asked, "What's the play if a marriage goes south?" His voice crackled through the line. "Secure your assets, Elias. Call me if it gets real." I took his advice, emailing him a scanned copy of my pension documents, ensuring my benefits were untouchable. At the base, I met with the admin clerk, confirming my emergency contact was Lucas, not Mara. "Just updating records," I said, my face blank as he stamped the forms. In Boise, before my flight, I'd packed a duffel with personal keepsakes, photos of my parents, my old high school Letterman jacket, storing them at Lucas's place. Mara noticed the missing items, her eyes narrowing. "Spring cleaning," I said, shrugging, and she didn't push. At the airport, her goodbye was perfunctory. A quick pat on my back. "Be careful," she said, already turning away. I boarded the plane, my gut telling me to brace for impact. That instinct was my edge now. Here in Helmand, I took new steps. I accessed my bank's app, setting alerts for any transaction over $100. I changed passwords on my email and military accounts, using random strings I memorized. I wrote a list in my field notebook: call Lucas, check VA loan status, review security footage. The cameras I'd installed in our house last year, motion-activated, cloud-synced, were my ace, a detail Mara likely forgot. I tested the app, confirming I could watch my own living room from 7,000 miles away. Each move was deliberate, like laying out gear before a mission. My hands stayed steady, but inside a storm churned. Not grief, but a cold determination to reclaim what was mine. Mara thought she'd outmaneuvered me, that I'd be too buried in war to notice. She was wrong. Every step I took now was a brick in the wall I was building, not just to protect myself, but to ensure she'd face the cost of her choices. The desert night stretched on, but I was wide awake, plotting my counterstrike with the clarity of a man who'd already lost everything. My preparations in the Helmand night felt like loading a magazine, each step deliberate, each click bringing me closer to control. But nothing braced me for the truth that hit 2 weeks later, a revelation that turned Mara's betrayal into something far uglier. Sitting in the mess hall, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. $87,000 yanked from our savings, leaving a pathetic 40.63. My fork froze midair, the din of clattering trays fading as I logged into the app. The transfer was to an account I didn't recognize, executed the day I'd left Boise. I slipped outside, the desert air thick with heat, and opened the security app for our North End house. The cameras I'd set up, wired for remote access, showed Caleb Holt lounging in my den, feet propped on my oak coffee table, sipping from a craft beer. Mara sat across from him, her laugh sharp, unfamiliar. She was wearing a silk blouse I'd never seen, her fingers twirling a necklace I hadn't bought. The footage was a gut punch, but I kept watching, my thumb hovering over the screen, capturing every frame. Back in my tent, I called Lucas Reed on a secure line. "Dig into the house," I said, my voice low. "Something's off." By dawn, he emailed me a scanned document, a refinance application for our property, pulling $350,000 in equity. My name was scrawled at the bottom, but the signature was wrong, the loops too loose, the angle off. "It's a forgery," Lucas confirmed, his tone grim. "And Caleb's listed as co-applicant. He's got a rap sheet, embezzlement 2017. I leaned against the tent pole, my breath shallow, the pieces snapping together. This wasn't just Mara leaving me, it was a calculated heist. Caleb wasn't some random fling, he was a player in her bigger game, using our home as collateral. I checked the bank records again, spotting smaller transfers, $5,000, $10,000, trickling out over weeks, all while I was dodging patrols. Mara had been siphoning our future, funneling it to Caleb or whoever else was in on this. My knuckles whitened, not from sorrow, but from a fury so sharp it felt like clarity. I wasn't just a husband scorned, I was a mark. I pulled up the camera, feed again, this time catching Caleb on our porch, handing a folder to a guy in a polo with a real estate logo. The man nodded, jotting notes, and drove off in a Lexus. I screenshot the license plate, my mind racing. Lucas called back, his voice urgent. That refinance? It's tied to a cash for homes outfit. They flip properties fast, below market. Caleb's name pops up in 3 other deals. My jaw locked, the truth sinking in. They were planning to sell my house, my life's work, before I could set foot on Idaho soil. The desert sky burned red, matching the heat in my chest. Mara and Caleb thought they'd outsmarted me, that I'd be too buried in war to fight back. But every forged signature, every stolen dollar was fuel. I wasn't breaking. I was building a case, my resolve hardening like steel. They'd underestimated a soldier's instinct, and that was their mistake. I closed my phone, the screen's glow fading, and vowed to turn their scheme into their undoing. The desert's red dawn mirrored the fire in my veins, the truth of Mara and Caleb's scheme sharpening my focus to a razor's edge. I wasn't just fighting for my Boise home now, I was dismantling their con, piece by calculated piece. Back. In Helmand, my tent became a war room, my phone a weapon. I'd caught their plan to flip my property, and I wasn't about to let them cash out while I was stuck in a war zone. It was time to set a trap, to let their greed bury them. Mara's text came at 0600, her words dripping with panic. Elias, we need to meet. Riverfront Park, tomorrow noon. I stared at the message, my lips curling into a grim smile. She thought I was still in the dark, that she could talk me into compliance. I typed back, fine, I'll be there, knowing I'd never set foot in that park. Instead, I called Lucas Reed, my voice steady. She's making a move, I said. Let's use it. He agreed, his tone clipped. Stay sharp. I'm on it. I arranged emergency leave, landing in Boise under a grey sky, checking into a motel off Vista Avenue under a fake name. Lucas met me at a diner, sliding into the booth with a folder. Got eyes on the house, he said, handing me a burner phone. I nodded, pulling up the security app. The cameras I'd wired in our North End place were live, streaming every move. At 09:45, Mara left for the park, her purse clutched tight, oblivious to my plan. I parked 3 blocks away, Lucas beside me, our truck blending into the suburban sprawl. At 10:10, a sedan rolled up to my driveway, a real estate logo plastered on the door. Simon Wells stepped out, clipboard in hand, shaking Caleb's hand like they were old pals. My cameras caught it all. Wells pacing my living room, snapping photos, Caleb gesturing at the fireplace I'd rebuilt. Buyers ready, Wells said, his voice clear through the app. Listed at $480, take $430 cash, quick close. Caleb grinned, leaning back. What about Carver? Mara says he's sniffing around. Wells scoffed. He's overseas. He'll fold. My pulse stayed even, but my grip on the phone tightened, a quiet thrill coursing through me. They were handing me their confession, unaware of the noose tightening. I recorded the feed, every word a nail in their coffin, and emailed. Hired to Agent Nora Chen at the FBI's Boise field office. Active fraud, my property, I wrote, attaching the video and Wells's plate number. Lucas watched, his eyes narrow. You're playing chess while they're playing checkers, he said. I didn't reply, my focus locked on the screen as Wells and Caleb wrapped up. I sent Mara a text. Running late, still at park. Her reply was instant. Where are you? I didn't answer, letting her squirm. The trap was set, their arrogance my leverage. I leaned back in the truck, the Boise skyline faint through the haze. Mara and Caleb thought they'd outrun me, but I was steps ahead, my counterstrike silent and surgical. The FBI would move soon, and when they did, I'd be watching, ready, to see their world implode. The Boise morning hung heavy, the air thick with the promise of a reckoning. From our truck, parked 3 blocks from my North End house, I watched the trap I'd set spring shut. My cameras had caught Caleb and Wells plotting to flip my home, and the FBI had my footage. Now it was time for their world to unravel. Lucas sat beside me, his jaw tight as we waited, the burner phone silent in my hand. My chest was steady, but a current of grim satisfaction pulsed through me. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. At 10:30, black SUVs roared into the cul-de-sac, tires screeching on asphalt. FBI agents spilled out, vests marked, sidearms drawn, converging on my porch like a SWAT drill. The front door swung open, and Wells stumbled onto the lawn, hands raised, his clipboard clattering to the ground. Caleb followed, face ashen, wrists yanked behind him as cuffs snapped shut. Agents stormed inside, emerging with laptops, folders, and a lockbox I'd never seen. Mara appeared from the park, sprinting up the street, her face crumpling as she saw the chaos. She froze by the mailbox, hands trembling, staring as her life collapsed in real time. I leaned forward, the truck's dashboard warm under my palms, taking in every detail. The agents moved with precision, bagging evidence, barking, orders. A neighbor peeked from her blinds, her dog yapping, but the street stayed eerily quiet, like the world held its breath. Mara's eyes darted, searching for an escape, but there was none. An agent approached her, notepad out, and she shook her head, lips moving in frantic denial. I didn't need to hear her words to know she was cornered, her lies exposed under the Idaho sun. Lucas broke the silence, his voice low. "They're done, Elias, you called it." I nodded, my gaze fixed on the scene. Agent Nora Chen's call came through, her tone clipped. "We've got them on conspiracy, wire fraud, and identity theft," she said. "Your video sealed it. We'll need your statement." I murmured agreement, hanging up, my focus still on Mara. She wasn't crying, just standing there, hollowed out, as agents loaded boxes into a van. The sight didn't spark joy, only a cold certainty that I'd reclaimed what was mine. The raid unfolded like a silent film, every movement sharp, deliberate. Wells tried to talk, gesturing wildly, but an agent cut him off, shoving him into a vehicle. Caleb kept his head down, shoulders slumped, the cocky grin from my cameras gone. Mara clutched her purse alone on the grass as the last SUV pulled away. I started the truck, the engine's rumble grounding me. Lucas glanced over. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice even, though a storm still churned inside. Not pain, but the weight of seeing my past dismantled. As we drove, off, the house receded in the rear view, a relic of a life I no longer wanted. Mara and Caleb's scheme had crumbled, their arrogance undone by my vigilance. I wasn't gloating, I was witnessing the scales balance. The FBI had their evidence, and I had my clarity. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my terms, unbowed, with the strength of a man who'd turned betrayal into a weapon. The Boise street faded behind us, my North End house now a crime scene in the FBI's hands. Driving away, the truck's hum steadied me, but a hollow ache lingered. Not for Mara, but for the years I'd poured into a life she'd torched. I'd exposed her and Caleb's fraud, watched their world collapse, yet the victory felt heavy, like a medal I hadn't wanted to earn. Back at the motel, I stood alone, ready to sever the final thread binding me to her. That evening, Mara's call came, her number flashing on my burner phone. I let it ring, each chime a test of my resolve, then answered, my voice flat. "What?" Her words tumbled out, choked with desperation. "Eldius, I didn't mean for this. Caleb pushed me into it. I was scared." Her plea hung in the air, a flimsy excuse that stirred nothing in me. I cut her off, my tone like steel. "It's over. Don't call again. I'm done." I hung. Up, the silence that followed louder than her voice, sealing the end of us. I met Lucas at his office the next day, the Boise skyline gray through his window. He slid a stack of papers across his desk. Divorce terms, asset splits, my pension locked tight. "She's got no claim," he said, tapping the folder. "Sign, and you're free." I scrawled my name, each stroke a release, cutting Mara from my future. The settlement was clean. She'd return the stolen funds, forfeit the house, and walk away with nothing. I didn't need her apologies or her tears. I needed my life back. Weeks later, I listed the house with a local realtor, a guy who didn't ask questions. The North End market was hot, and it sold fast, the proceeds wired to my Caldwell account. I drove past one last time, the sold sign stark against the lawn I'd mowed for years. The cedar deck, the sage-green walls, they were someone else's now. I felt no nostalgia, only a quiet resolve to leave the ghosts behind. My truck's tires crunched gravel as I pulled away, Boise shrinking in the mirror. At the motel, I packed my duffel, the essentials I'd salvaged fitting easily. Dog tags, photos, my old Letterman jacket. Lucas stopped by, handing me a coffee. "You're clear, Elias," he said, his grip firm on my shoulder. "Start fresh." I nodded, the weight of his words settling in. Mara's betrayal had carved me raw, but it hadn't broken me. I'd faced her lies, dismantled her scheme, and walked away whole, my dignity intact. The finality hit as I sat on the motel bed, the TV's drone filling the room. I wasn't the man who'd married Mara, nor the soldier who'd trusted her. I was something new, harder, clearer, unburdened by her shadow. The turmoil that had churned since Helmand quieted, replaced by a steely calm. I didn't hate her. I didn't feel much at all. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. The chapter was closed, the page turned. As I stepped into the Idaho dusk, the motel's neon buzzed behind me. My future was a blank slate, and for E. The first time that felt like freedom. I climbed into my truck, the engine roaring to life, ready to drive towards something no one could steal. The Idaho dusk gave way to a starlit sky as I left Boise behind, my truck carving a path toward a new beginning. Mara's betrayal, once a jagged wound, had forged me into something stronger, and I was done carrying its weight. At 39, after 20 years in the Army, I retired, trading the 101st Airborne's chaos for a quiet life I could shape with my own hands. The turmoil that had gripped me in Helmand was gone, replaced by a hard-earned peace that felt like home. I bought a cabin outside Sandpoint, nestled in the Selkirk Mountains, 2 rooms, 10 acres of pine and cedar, a gravel trail leading to a clear creek. My German shepherd Scout claimed the land first, his paws kicking up dirt as he chased shadows through the grass. I started carpentry, crafting bookshelves and tables for locals, my hands finding purpose in the grain of oak and walnut. The work was steady, my pension covering the rest, and the solitude suited me. No neighbors, no noise, just the wind and Scout's bark to break the stillness. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, the mug warm against my palms as dawn painted the peaks gold. I'd hike the trails, Scout at my side, the crunch of pine needles grounding me in the present. The cabin's walls held no echoes of Mara or Caleb. They were mine, built from sweat and intention. I hung a single frame in the kitchen, a letter from Sarah Thompson, a Navy wife whose home I'd helped save by exposing Caleb's fraud ring. "Your fight gave us a chance," she wrote, her words inked in blue. On rough days when the past crept in, I'd read it, letting her gratitude anchor me. The locals knew me as the quiet guy with the dog, and I liked it that way. I'd grab a beer at the general store, swap stories about fishing spots, and drive, home under a canopy of stars. The Army had taught me to survive, but this life taught me to live, simply, honestly, without the baggage of deceit. I wasn't running from the pain. I'd faced it, dismantled it, and moved on. The man who'd trusted Mara was gone, but the one who stood here was whole, his scars a map of battles won. One evening, as the creek murmured and Scout dozed by the fire, I sat with Sarah's letter, its edges worn from handling. It wasn't just about me. It was about the others, the families Caleb had targeted, whose lives I'd helped reclaim. That truth settled deep, a quiet pride that didn't need a parade. I'd rebuilt not just my life, but a piece of something bigger, a ripple of justice that reached beyond my cabin's walls. Now I'm curious about you. Betrayal cuts us all at some point, maybe not as loud as mine, but just as real. What's your story? How did you rebuild when someone broke your trust? Drop a comment, share your thoughts, or just tell me, what's the one thing you'd hold on to if your world turned upside down? I'm listening, and I know rebuilding isn't easy. Let's talk about what it takes to rise again.